Hello, my name's host Derek. I'm the host talking with famous people, and I'm here with famous people and Saturday afternoon happy time express riders. Callum, Elsie, Megabro, student of being LW. That's an interesting name. And Ubi, short for ubiquitous. I remembered Ubi.
There you go.
So, I'd like to start this afternoon's exciting adventures of learning by talking about the comments of one Mr. Number 8, I assume Mr. And it's elicited quite a bit of comment writing on the comments of that video with Barry launching some fairly effective volleys in my defense, basically, or in attacking number 8 or whatever. So, but the thing I took away from this is the idea of cognitive functions being something you possess rather than something you exercise, right? That to say that one has introverted intuition is a shorthand for saying that one reflexively prefers to use the manner of attention known as introverted intuition over the alternative, extroverted intuition, when intuition is called for in a given situation. Does anybody want to disagree with that little part right there before we go any further, or anybody want to add on to that little part right there?
Well, playing devil's advocate, you could argue that if you have done it as a habit enough, then your brain will wire itself that way.
Okay. But I would say that to some extent perhaps that's not taking into account the conscious-unconscious factor of things. That it's just because you've wired it to be more conscious doesn't mean the other one's not occurring, and it's a matter of attending to convert something from unconscious to conscious. Now, I would tend to agree that one can't simply attend to introverted intuition and suddenly find oneself habitually doing it. That I would agree. But I would say that when one talks about having a cognitive function in that fashion, one neglects to note the fact that the reverse or the shadow side of the intuition that one has is always at work as well. It's just at work in a different way.
And people have two brain hemispheres, so even if one of them is doing one thing, doesn't necessarily mean the other one's not doing another thing.
Okay. All right. Well, my take on cognitive functions as a model is, first and foremost, is that it is primarily a descriptive model. To the extent that it's predictive in terms of ratios of frequency of use, not so much in terms of any specific behaviors that one can point to and say you're necessarily going to behave like this or that. I think that in the comment chain there, number 8 kind of both makes a straw man in assuming that people have the least sophisticated possible understanding of cognitive functions, and at the same time demonstrates an understanding of cognitive functions that assumes the physical structure possession notion in large part, it would seem to me. But I mean, I don't actually want to get into the nitty-gritty of critiquing his comments or anything. I want more to talk about the social use of cognitive functions as a way of justifying, displaying, or otherwise accomplishing one's own comparative superiority to other individuals, which is, I think, sort of what number 8 is kind of doing there. What are your guys' takes on how people utilize the cognitive function model in dealing with talking about it and thinking about it and employing it in their discourse?
I think kind of like with any knowledge, I guess, that people gain. I mean, a lot of the time when I talk, maybe when you talk to them, they use that knowledge to try to kind of prop themselves up. I mean, it doesn't just happen with cognitive function model. It happens with just about, like, today I was talking to an engineer and he was talking about some stuff, and I mean, instead of like really trying to teach me the information or kind of tell me, there was a lot of emotional tones under his conversation where it was more like, boasting or like
displaying.
Yeah, so it wasn't, I think it's kind of with anything, you get attached to the knowledge that you think you have, and instead of, it kind of tampers with the truth of it in a way, because if you get emotionally attached to a certain frame, or like,
Well, see, I
certain set
empathize. I empathize with the guy because I know what he's sort of thinking or going through. On one level, he's thinking like, I'm super smart, and I'm tired of not being given the respect that I see being given to people who are acknowledged as super smart, namely the people who come up with these various models. I'm just as smart as Carl Jung, and I'm pissed about the fact that he's this famous guy, and I'm just this person nobody's ever heard of. There's a certain amount of that that's implicit in being an outlier, I think. I think it's fair to say this guy's an outlier. He is very bright. His answer was quite good. I mean, he did an excellent job of it. I was going to say in response, if you really want to see how extroverted intuition has certain advantages, you should come on GTM and let's dance. Because you're not that light on your feet, INTJ, there are advantages to extroverted intuition. We tend to be improvisationally quite deft and tactically quite deft. And so, I mean, regarding that central thesis that introverted intuition is inherently superior and that extroverted intuition is more like a sensor, which I also thought is to him, that's clearly some sort of derogatory statement to make. Like, it's like the worst thing you could be is like a sensor or something. But regardless of that, my position on it is that, in fact, both kinds of intuition are used by both types of people. One is habitually used more than the other by the respective type, but that they both have their advantages and disadvantages, and regardless, it's not a fucking superpower, right? It's just a habit of attention.
Yeah. And you're trying, it's like with anything else, you're preserving yourself, so like you're defending. If he thinks NI is the be-all best way to intuit, or like whatever, I mean, that's just, he really likes the idealizing his way of doing things, or his way of approaching something.
But anyway, I want to give him props. I want to give him props for doing a good job with the rhetoric in general. I was impressed with his response to my video in particular. I thought that was pretty solid, pretty well done. So I didn't want to go through and parse it and trash it like I normally would because, frankly, number 8, you did a pretty solid job there. I still think your notions are predicated on some silliness, and your 7th slot FE is showing. But beyond that, you're a smart guy, and I want to give you credit for that. So that's, I guess, all I have to say about number 8. But regarding introverted intuition, let's address this notion that, I think there's some element of truth to it, that introverted intuition will make basically any sort of connection with disparate objects, blah, blah, blah. He basically said it's the kind of intuition that is not, don't touch that kitty, you're going to fuck it up. She's going for it. Kitty, come here. Okay. I think that there is an element of universality to introverted intuition that does apply. It does manage to successfully connect lots of disparate notions into single wholes. I think the thing that's missing from the equation, perhaps in drawing the distinction, is a time frame issue. That there's percolation involved with introverted intuition that's that's the trade-off for the holism of the thing. How else would you make these distinctions? Anybody? Mega Bro, do you have any thoughts on the inclusion of passage of time, and the understanding of the two intuitions?
Well, I think of introverted intuition as it kind of figures out how things are probable using like triangulation. Suppose you had like a person, yeah, so you had a stadium full of people. You could connect any of the two people in the stadium together through some sort of path. But some people would be closer to each other than others. And you could figure out how closely people are related by the time delay between communication.
Okay.
Theoretically, anyone in the stadium could pass a message to anyone else.
Okay. That's an interesting analogy. I'll have to process that a bit. I'll have to let my introverted intuition sit with that for a while.
So, a lot of times, I can see how anything could be connected with anything. It's just some things are more connected than others, and there's no, like, really sharp line.
Right. So how do you?
I didn't see your line of comments with number 8, but I know this isn't about number 8, but just real quick, the one thing that I would say, like, if anybody says one function, like NI is just the best function out of all, I don't really understand that statement, because it seems like it would be better in certain contexts for sure, like you would use NI or need it for. But just like you said, if you want to see the benefits of NE, GTM, and dance, like, so to say one function is like the best, if that's what he was indeed saying, just sounds really silly to me, because it might be the best in a certain context, or
well,
be
that's
good at
true.
certain things.
That's true. What? Who said that? I'm gonna try.
You.
That's true. Okay, he didn't say it was the best, but
Okay, sorry.
I mean, he said that's true. I mean, he didn't say it was the best, but he made it clear that he felt it had vastly more utility and such than NE. He said he's one thing I thought was odd, and it's something I would actually probably take exception to, is this notion that NE is more linear. I find that's the TI part of it, right? That the NE part is the disparate insights that come into play. The TI is the walking through and filling out the idea that the NE has drawn the connection between. I think the fact that NE is I agree, as I said in other videos before, that there is a quality to NE that can be traced back, even when it seems to be about very divergent things. In my mind, I can figure out the associative chain in a way that I can't with introverted intuition, which I'm also fairly familiar with, I'd like to think, at least in music. So on that ground, I would agree with the basic notion that there's some linear quality. However, I would disagree that it's a linear quality that you can trace back. I would say that it's that I can trace it back. I can see the disparate associative leaps because I understand my own personal life history. Like, a lot of those associative leaps are personalized, right? It's because I saw that movie in 11th grade that said that song that says, cold water, it's a watery grave. I'm the one who saw that movie in health class and thought that song was funny. That's why, when you talked about cold water, I made this weird associative leap. It's not something you can trace back. It's something I can trace back. you'd have to know my personal life history to trace it back. Because that's what NE does, is it references SI shit, little weird random things from your personal life, and connects it to whatever's being talked about to create this weird, disparate new thing, and then TI fleshes it out. I think that's a good explanation for NE, really. Thoughts? I think it's a good demonstration of NE there, too. I didn't really have any idea where I was going with that, but came up with something pretty good anyway.
I don't really think of a lot of thought as very linear. Now, extroverted thinking can be pretty linear, but as far as everything else, man, I don't really see it.
Well, I see introverted thinking is very linear insofar as I'm using it to speak out loud, right? Like when I'm applying it simply internally, it's not. But I feel as though when I'm using it to speak out loud, unless you'd call this extroverted thinking, but I see it as...
If you're unwrapping that cluster of TI stuff, that would be at least some extroverted thinking if you have to organize that into sentences.
Okay, well, I mean, I do tend to find that explaining shit is very linear. That there's a top, a thesis, and a path to get there, and there's some variability within the structure, but ultimately you've got to hit certain points in order to, and they have to be, someone at least have to be in a certain order in order to get your point across. So maybe that is TE. If that's TE, then I'd say I'm pretty good at TE. But I've never thought of that as TE. But then that would make sense too, you know. But I wouldn't value that as TE or something.
Well, it wouldn't have to be very much. It would only have to work on like the sentence scale.
Interesting. Okay, so any other thoughts about NI, NE, and whatnot, and some such, and howdy who's?
Do we have any NI DOMs here?
Yeah,
I'm an NI dom.
Megabro is.
Can you help explain how NI manifests?
You don't like it. He didn't like your earlier explanation, Megabro. He wants a new one. Let's see Megabro pump up the NE and come up with several different new explanations on the fly.
It's like, man, there's no words.
Is it like Eureka's, or what is it?
No, it's just this, dude. It's like when you know that part's shitty and that part's good. That's it. It's that simple.
I can see like abstract triangulations of how far things are apart from each other.
It's shit that you don't know why you know, but you know it, and you have to learn to trust that. That's what it is. And you have to know when to trust it, because as any user, you don't naturally have a good sense of that at all. For me, I've developed over time because of music, and specifically in music, but I had it in writing all along, a clear sense of what works and what doesn't work. Like, my text is pretty clean. My prose is, the voice is as it ought to be, and that's what I mean. It's as it ought to be. It's clearly a way it ought to sound, and it's clearly a way that it's too wordy, and it's clearly a way that it's not expansive enough, and there's clearly a way that it sounds stilted, and there's clearly a way that it sounds shitty, and there's clearly one way that sounds right, you know? That's fucking introverted intuition, and you gotta learn to trust it, because you don't know, you can't explain why, and you hate that as an extroverted intuitor. You go like, but I can't hold the reins. I can't drive this cart. I just have to sit in it and let it go where it goes. I don't like that. Well, too bad. That's introverted intuition. You don't get to hold the reins.
So does your NI screw you over then, or you just trust it?
All right, I've learned to trust it, and I know when to trust it, usually. If I trust it at the wrong times, put it this way, I know when I have to wait. That's what I know. And I've learned that a lot of things have to wait a couple of days before I know whether it's good or not. It takes me a couple of days to know that.
Well, yeah, that'd be like, man, I can see it, I can't say it.
But that's what you got to learn, is when you got to wait. When you're dragging your feet, that's your introverted intuition telling you to wait.
Okay. NI, when it's trying to figure out how well things fit, it has to take all this time to spin it and see and echo and see how far apart things are and stuff like that. And that takes time.
It's
Right.
processing and measuring.
It's processing that you're unaware of, and you have to learn to feel it happening. It's sort of like this sort of. It's not like this, but it's an analogy. It's like you know how when you turn something on, if the screen's not showing anything, you can still tell it's on because it's got this very faint, high pitched kind of sound that it makes or something, and and so it's like you can tell that when it's on, it's thinking about something because you're still thinking about it actively with your extroverted intuition, but it's not getting anywhere. Your introverted intuition is just bouncing between different possible things. So you kind of like put it aside, and then later when you come back, your introverted intuition is giving you the obvious answer, and you just have to go, oh, well, that's it. I recognize it. It's got that smell. It smells like the truth.
It's like echolocation inside your head.
Yeah. So
Do you have to like put an effort to use the echolocation? It just happens.
you can't put any effort. That's what fucking sucks about it. You just have to learn to sort of stand to the side and not look directly at it and go like, okay, and just sort of like peek. You can't put any effort into it. It's fucking annoying. I gotta go get my cigarettes out of the car. You guys finish up this talk about NI real quick.
Man, I don't like being put on the spot. 'Cause I never know what to say.
Mega Bro, you're the NI dumb, right?
Yes.
INFJ?
INTJ.
Oh, INTJ?
So this guy who was, I don't know, arguing with Eric, he's an INTJ supposedly.
Yeah,
That's what
number
he says
8,
he is.
right?
Yeah.
You guys have the link to that video?
Does he know for sure, or did he take a cognitive function test, a quadra test, and all that stuff? I don't know.
Does this conclude our episode on introverted and extroverted intuition?
I believe so.
We just ran off the rails.
Okay, well, thanks for watching Talk with Famous People.